Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and reptilian alike. My name's Scyushi, and we are back again for some more Trove to Trove, and today we're going to be talking about the new Gardening 2.0. So this is going to be a video talking about Gardening 2.0 specifically, right? So I'll have an in-depth video talking about gardening as a whole. If you guys don't have any experience with it, we'll lightly graze upon it today, but I'm not really going to go into 100% detail about every single plant and all that stuff. Even in my in-depth video, we won't so much, but more so today, I'm just going to be focusing on the ins and outs. Here's how you start getting into the new gardening right away. So first and foremost, you're going to be needing bubble pod seeds, which, man, the building crafting inventory is broken right now. Bubble pod plant seeds you end up getting just randomly by running over grass and stuff. So Fey Biome I would recommend as your best bet for that, because these so far seem to have been nerfed since the test server, and anytime you see a moon dungeon, they're going to be really good for you because they have plants all around them like crazy. And there's another Fey dungeon that ends up having tons of plants around them as well. But then you'll end up getting this bubble plant seed that you can see in my hotbar down below. And if we end up loading up our cornerstone, you can only plant this on your cornerstone, and then you basically gotta wait a minute or two for it to end up fully blooming. I don't have the patience for that though, so we are just going to end up using an instant grower. Instant growers you're going to be able to get through gardening, but more importantly, the instant grower tome, which is something that you also end up crafting out of gardening, near as I recall, but you can still buy it on the market from players. So anyways, bubble pod plant seed, boop. You harvest that, then you got some poo you gotta lasermancy away. Now we've got the core of the update in the palm of our hand with the bubble pod itself. Now the bubble pod is gonna act the same as a pinata. You throw it down on the ground, and whoever's the host, whoever threw down the bubble pod, is guaranteed going to get themselves an item. And then there's going to be 7 other players around you that can potentially end up getting the items. If you have more than 8 players in total, it means that the game is going to randomly choose who gets the item and who doesn't get the item. Okay, so it does definitely pay to throw down these bubble pods when there's other people around, because then they're going to end up getting plants the same as you. There's no reason not to let them just benefit from that. And you can rarely end up having recipes drop, which recipes are going to end up unlocking, gardening recipes, I should say specifically, are going to unlock different plants that you can end up getting. You can also get the blossoming dragon egg fragment, which crafts this dragon right here. You get those from bubble pods as well. Not all the time, but most of the time. You can also use a dragon effigy to craft this guy as well. But then you can also use the composter, and this will be important, so keep in mind. The composter is going to act like a normal, pretty much like a loot collector, but for gardening related materials and stuff. So if we've already got this Infinium flower seed as a recipe unlocked, so we may as well destroy it and get a compost box, which we'll talk about that in a bit. Or we can end up destroying the blossoming dragon fragment to get ourselves some superior, is that refuse, I think they call it, which again, we'll talk about that in a bit as well. So now we've actually gotten plants from the bubble pod. It's as simple as planting it down on the ground here, bloop, bloop, and then you either have to wait for them to grow up, or you can use an insta grower again, which I'll do it just for the sake of the video. And this will actually cover a big area, so you don't really want to waste your insta growers. That's going to force them to the point where you can actually water them. And now this is only going to affect the new plants, not any of the old plants. But watering them is, well, it's time gated. So basically this plant is water level 0 of 3. That means that you have to water it 3 days, and that's based on the Trove daily reset. So you can't just water it, wait an hour, and water it again. You can water it once a day. So on that 3rd day of watering it, you're gonna have to wait for the Trove daily reset to happen one more time after it's been fully watered, and then it blooms, and then you can harvest it. That's pretty much the entire gardening in a nutshell. Now let's talk about the composting and how that relates to the harvesting station. So the gardening itself, I guess I'll mention too, once you get to the gardener tab, that's when gardening 2.0 comes into place. And then anything before that is just the normal gardening, which I'll talk about when I go in depth in another video. So with the harvesting station, this is where you're going to end up crafting, these compost boxes. out of the refuse that we ended up getting from that, you know, from composting items in the compost bin loot collector type thing, right? And these compost heaps, they call them, let's just call them compost boxes because it makes more sense. These are going to end up giving you not only recipes, but also just, well, recipes right there, but they're also going to end up giving you a material that is required for some of the later plants, which is concentrated compost. So you're going to need that in order to craft a lot of the plants. But on top of it, the quality compost and the superior one will end up dropping more quantities of it, higher tiers of recipes, and the superiors are the only ones, near as I can tell, that can drop cookie musk as well as other things. And the only way that you can craft these is you basically are going to have to compost in the composting loot collector. You're going to have to compost alchemy plants. Alchemy plants are pretty much the higher tiers of plants. There's no distinction between them and the other plants other than they're higher in the tier on the gardening bench. So you can use at your own discretion to see which of these is going to end up being an alchemy plant based on the description of them, which I think there's only alchemy plants like in this higher tier, if I'm not mistaken, or something. I don't know. But what you end up getting out of the cookie musk is it's going to end up being a material that you are reliant on in order to craft the ally habitats, the mounts, as far as I know. No, they don't actually cost that. Do they cost cookie musk? Yeah, they do actually. Okay. And the ally habitats are a little bit weird. The way that these are going to end up working is you basically plant them down in a club world. Thankfully, everyone is allowed to harvest from these. Near as I can tell, it's your own instance, so you don't gotta worry about stealing each other's plants. And you'll plant these down, and so long as you end up having 300 in your gardening profession, you can harvest from them every day. And when you harvest from them, you have a chance of getting an ally, and that ally is just going to end up being mastery. That's all there really is to it, right? There's not really anything more. Now, another thing I want to talk about before we get on to the badges already is the moonlight bulb. So opposite of the sunlight bulb, this is a plant that can just spawn anywhere out in the world. They're fairly rare in the first place to end up finding, but on top of that, they will actually despawn from your inventory. They will delete themselves if you log out of Trove for more than an hour, which we all know is just a mistake. Because Trove comes offline more often than we end up losing our own connection to the game in the first place. At least it's got an hour leniency, but even then, the servers, whenever they end up kicking the bucket and coming offline, they're usually offline for a couple hours now, aren't they? So that kind of sucks. So I would actually recommend the only time that you actually farm the moonlight bulbs is when you need them. And when you need them, I mean, you have a plant that's absolutely ready to go. You get just the minimum amount of moonlight bulbs and then you craft said plant. Okay, so last but not least, we're going to talk about the gardening badges themselves. And again, if you find this video a little bit confusing for you, maybe it's going a little bit too fast, then that's where the in-depth gardening tutorial is going to end up coming into play. Okay, I have that planned, don't you worry. But the gardening badges will explain a fair deal about just how the gardening works in general. So there's going to be a harvesting badge, which is quite literally based off of harvesting plants. So as you end up picking plants up, I don't think that this ends up affecting any of the previous plants from gardening 1.0, let's call it. So newbie and up to gardener, right? So I think it quite literally is just when you go up to a plant and you press E and you actually harvest it. So you have to end up having a plant come to full fruition before you can end up doing it. Then there's also the watering of the plants, which again only affects the gardening 2.0 plants. As you end up going higher and higher in these badge tiers, you're going to end up having an opportunity to get your hands on some pretty nifty items. You'll end up getting an ally that allows you to, so long as it's equipped, your character model will end up harvesting all the plants around you, so you don't have to do it manually, because it can end up being quite a mess if you're doing it all manually. And then there's going to be another mount that will water all the plants that you walk over, or free-to-play players do have the option of buying the tractors all individually for 3,000 credits each, which is quite expensive. But if you do want to fork out the money, there's actually a $20 pack that gets you all 3 of these tractors and a bunch of bauble pod seeds and stuff like that. So it is very worth spending $20 on the pack, only because If you're going the credits route, 3,000 credits is basically $20. So you're basically paying the same amount of time, if you're a free-to-play player, towards just buying the $20 pack times 3, right? I mean, I know that that's not how you can look at it. Free-to-play players, you go ahead and do what you got to do. You can grind nitro right now, and credit pouches are surprisingly cheap. So watering the plants, you know, that'll end up giving you that floral fin thing. And then I guess I should mention also, as for watering the plants, you're going to have to craft this new watering can. The new crafting tables are here as well, and we'll have a separate video that's going to talk about food, okay? And then finally, in the final tab, you can get an infinite watering can, which is required for the watering badge, but you can see is dauntingly expensive, so we'll just skip right over that. And then finally, the last badge is collecting all of the gardening recipes, which is fairly difficult, but it will end up giving you the evolving alchemy plant seed. Now this is where things get a little bit interesting. The evolving alchemy plant can actually spawn into any alchemy plant up to radiant quality, as it says, a random alchemy plant. Because the thing is, out of bauble pods, you can actually end up getting some plants that you can't otherwise craft out of the new gardening. There's chaos chest plants that you can end up getting out of this. There's, well, I know there's a lot of other things that you can end up getting out of it. They escape my mind right now. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick right now, so my brain is just like, bleh. But there's a bunch of different plants you can get out of the bauble pods that you can't actually craft, and that's where the evolving alchemy plant will come into play, because you can place that down, and it could potentially end up spawning a chaos chest plant. The point is, though, that the chaos chests and other rare resources such as that are random, so you can't actually farm them. Now, there are certain resources out of the gardening, like there's a nitro that you can end up growing out of it, but I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. Like, the cost does not reward what you end up spending towards it, because you know, when I tested it on the test server, I tested out the Cinnabar plant, and it costs so much to end up crafting one of those plants, and you only get like 100 Cinnabar out of it or something. So hopefully they end up buffing it, because getting 100 nitro out of this much resources wouldn't be worth it. Not to mention the amount of time that you would have to dedicate to it. I'd say you have to get like maybe 500 nitro out of it or something like that. I don't know. It depends how many times you could harvest it. But again, we'll save that for another day. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this covered the basics of the Gardening 2.0 for you guys. And again, I'll have an in-depth tutorial that's going to go into more detail about the entirety of gardening. So if you're a new Trove player and you don't know how the gardening works, this is as good excuse as any for me to end up having an updated tutorial that talks about everything there is to know about the gardening. But we'll save that for another day. For today, I just wanted to have this because we're going to end up having the patch notes video come out later today as well. If you are a new player, you can actually use the sign up link in the description to sign up for Trove, and then anything that you end up buying out of the store, I will end up making a cut of that, which is very, very awesome, because you're basically buying things in Trove that you otherwise would have, but a little bit of the purchase is going to end up going towards yours truly, which helps me pay the bills. But I would also appreciate, just in general, if you don't want to do that, you can always Hadouken the like button, you know, smash that subscribe button, join the reptilian army. We will take over the world one day at a time. Or if you want to go the extra mile, you know, we got the merch store, we got, you know, Gawk Box. There's all sorts of things you can do. Just check out the description. That's all I ask. Either way, have yourselves a great day. Sign on. Stay ever good, everybody.